So, Johanna, I'm starting a 5K and I was curious, how much should my race cost?
Unfortunately, that question is going to have a longer answer than you might want. I can't just tell you your race should cost $30 because there's a couple of different pieces of information you're going to want to look at. But what I can do is take you through kind of the steps and data that I would use to price your race. The first thing we're going to do is look at kind of the national averages so you can get an understanding of what races usually cost. If most races are $30, you probably don't want to charge $5 or $70 unless you have a pretty good reason to be doing so. So we take our data from the Race Trends report, and we can see that a 5K here in 2024 was an average of $30.48. That's the average price all the way across the country. The other thing I take into account on an average price is that prices do tend to go up. You can see that our 5K prices increased 3.6% from 22 to 23, and then another 1.7% from 23 to 24. So if you're pricing your race for 2025, you might want to assume another slight increase for the averages there. The next thing that you want to take into account is that race prices aren't actually the same across the whole country. And some of that is regional and some of that is very local, where it's, you may have a municipality that has really high permitting costs. And so all of the races there are higher than other races in your region. So what you want to do is do a little bit of a deep dive to get your own information about the races around you and what they cost. You can do this manually. You can look up every race and write down exactly how much they cost. But I really recommend a cheat for this. To make this process a little bit faster. You can use a race calendar like runsignup.com/races or runningintheusa.com and go to ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to do the research for you, to go through that race calendar and figure out how much the average price is or the high and low price for the races in your area. It might not be perfect. You can see, depending on how the information is displayed, it might miss a race here or there that you still want to check manually, but it's going to give you a quick look to make sure that your price is kind of within range of other races in your area. Now you have all the data about what other races cost, and that's a really good starting point because you do want to make sure that your race is going to be affordable for runners in your area. But the main pricing point that you need is to actually make the money that you need. For most races, they're going to get their real revenue from sponsorships, not from race registration fees, but you usually need your race registration fees to, at a minimum, cover all of your costs. So you want to look at a budget for your race. If this is your first race, you probably don't know exactly how much everything costs, but you can start doing some research to put down numbers for each of your costs. You can track this in Excel or in anything that you want. But Race Directors HQ has a great budget building tool that can be useful for, if nothing else, giving you an idea what categories to be thinking about and to be looking and to be putting in. Use that to kind of put in what your overall costs should be. And then once you have that overall costs, in this case, it was about $8,500. Think about how many runners you expect to have, divide the total cost by those runners, and that's how much you need from each runner at a minimum for your registration fee. So far, all we've done is figure out kind of what your average price should be. But if you've ever done a race, you know that many of them have more than one price. There might be a price when the race opens for registration and a different price later on, possibly 3 or 4 extra prices. So you do want to think about now, where are your highs and lows of that race price. The first question is, how many price increases do you want to have? For this one, again, we pulled up some data. I'm going to tell you that we're going to tell you to kind of ignore that data because I think a lot of races could use price increases more efficiently. We know in 2024, the average 5K had just 1 price increase, and I would recommend you have at least 2. The reason for that is kind of twofold. One, it gives you a little bit of flexibility to still offer a low price to people who really need that because you're going to make that up on the higher prices on the end. The second and really most important reason is that having a price increase is a great motivating factor to get people to actually go through and register. And you want to have that kind of reason to take action as many times as possible. We do look at kind of when people register for a race to figure out where it makes sense to put those price increases. You're going to see different kind of curves for that depending on the race distance. But you can kind of see that there is, the initial jump of registration, and then it kind of slowly comes up before you have a little bit of a lull leading up to race day. So typically, again, your specific curve may look a little bit different, but if I'm looking at a 5K, thinking, I'd really like to get those people who are registering 15 to 30 days out to maybe register more like 30, the high end of that, so that we can know how many people we think we're going to have and better plan for ordering t-shirts. So you want 1 price increase before that ordering deadline there. And then you're going to want one price increase again as you're coming up to race week, hopefully to try to get people to register before it's really, really late and give you a little bit more of a heads up. The last piece with price increases is figuring out, how much is your high and how much is your low. Somewhat intuitively, the shorter your distance, the cheaper the price of the race overall, the smaller the difference is going to be between the high and the low. But it's pretty typical for a 5K for us to see about a $10 to $15 difference between where your race starts at its lowest price and where it ends at its highest price. And you can find in between there, you can use that average you decided before to figure out which one's lower, which one's higher, and make sure that you have, you're charging enough money for your event. The final step that we're going to talk about is just discounting. Most races have discounts of some type. We tend to recommend that you pick 1 to 2 discounting options so that you can be really clear about what your discounts are. People understand the pricing that you have, and they are motivated to take action by that pricing. I'm not going to go through every discounting option you can use, but you kind of just want to make sure you're thinking about your audience and what's going to get people most excited for your race. Once you've done that, you have a price for your race. The only other thing I'd say is that you want to make sure that you go through this process again every year, because your costs might change, your number of runners might change, things can shift year to year, and you want to make sure you're always reevaluating so that your race is making enough money to cover your costs.
All right, thank you.
How much are you going to charge now?
It looks like $35 for adults, but that's going to go up closer to the race week. All right, now where do I get medals for my race? Search the spam box on info@runsignup.com. So many people want to sell us medals.